heard me get into the distinction between public and private unions with Umberto Fontova just there at the end of the conversation. We're going to explore that and some other Labor Day related topics with Tim Westhoff right now. Tim, thank you for joining me.
As always, Adam, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, happy Labor Day, and we don't have that much time, so I want to make sure you get a chance to bring out the points that are not going to be made in the media and in schools, et cetera, here. So go for it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and the first thing I want to say is just, happy Labor Day to everyone, all your listeners and the like, and obviously appreciating and respecting labor is important, and I will defer back to one of my favorite quotes on the subject, which is from a man that I worked for, Mayor Pete Wilson, who later became senator and governor from California. And
he was mayor of what city, real quick?
San Diego. He was mayor of San Diego. And then ran for the U.S. Senate, which he held for 2 terms from the state of California, and then ran for governor. And it was he who actually coined the oft-stated phrase, the greatest social program ever devised by man is a job. And to a great extent, that's what we celebrate today. But in that, we know that there are going to be a tremendous amount of protests and rallies going on today from unions. And we all know the history of unions, and they were necessary to come about and protect workers' rights and things of that nature, but they have gone way beyond that. But I think the most important variance in the political elements of unions today is that variance which Umberto, I'm sure, is also touched on between public and private employee unions. And while I have problems with private unions, most notably the SEIU, which is the most politically oriented union nowadays, there is something to be said in support of private unions, in so much that at least they have skin in the game. Mm-hmm. And by that standpoint, they have a bargaining power to bargain with management on their piece of the profits that they contribute to. And if the company is not being profitable, they're going to have to come to the table, and usually do in some form, with concessions. So there's a give and take, at least in the private sector, because even private unions understand with their employees and so forth that if the company goes under, they're out of work. Mm-hmm. So they've got that relationship. However, public unions had none of that. There is no profitability, sadly, to the running of government, whether it's at a city level, state level, or federal level. And so it's always, and they basically, kind of created public unions out of the patronage system, which of course began and is still run primarily through the Democratic Party and the liberal left, because that's a huge part of their voting base. And so patronage kind of began with, hey, I'm going to give you this if you vote for me, so to speak. And then, of course, they got formalized into actual public unions. And without a doubt, I would certainly recommend for the security and protection of such important public workers as our first responders, police, fire, EMTs, and even to certain protections for sanitation workers, all these those occupations, fine. But I don't know that they need to be protected under a union. I think there's another way to go about it. But the biggest problem with public unions is there is no bottom line. They're the only shareholders, as it were, of government entities are the taxpayers. Mm-hmm. And, the public sector gets to operate totally different from a corporation in so much that, hey, we're short on money. That's okay. We'll just raise taxes. And so there's nothing that the public union members have in the way of skin in the game. What they do have in the game, however, is political cachet and power, and they use it immensely. And most public union workers, and I think to the last tally, at over 95% vote Democrat. And the it is a problem, and I think public unions need to be eliminated. I think they need to be eliminated across teachers. I think they need to be eliminated most clearly in all of the what I would call the pencil-pushing bureaucratic positions that are throughout Washington, D.C., every state government, every city and local government, and because there's absolutely no point to them because they're not there with skin in the game to a bottom line, and it is the John Q. taxpayer that essentially suffers.
I agree with everything
I mean,
you say.
yeah, and let's face it,
they're so involved in the political process. They're the loudest voices in the political process. They're not merely involved inappropriately. They're the ones out there, as I talked about with Umberto, with Che Guevara signs.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, there's a link between socialistic and communistic political movements and labor unions more than anything else.
Yep.
And when you look at it from an international and an historical perspective, and the closest equivalent of that would be the SEIU, which, although mostly a private union, still touches within also the public union sector.
Great.
And the SEIU, which has now as part of its membership the Teamsters and is a segment of the AFL-CIO, they basically are the most politically active financially and otherwise. They actually spent $60.7 million to get Obama elected,
yeah.
And were quite proud to do so. And it was, and they've also been held to the greatest amount of violations and fines in campaign laws.
Yep. Any final thoughts, Tim? Any final thoughts before I let you go?
Well, I think the final thought is that we celebrate Labor Day because we celebrate the importance of that job, and we certainly enforce and believe in the importance of protecting the worker. However, what's happening with the unions right now is not a matter of so much protecting the worker, but really protecting the union hierarchy and the political connections. And the average guy that's doing the work, who basically has no choice over his membership dues for the most part, and has no choice as to where they go politically, is the one that's also being held at ransom, not just the taxpayer. And that's what needs to change, in my opinion.
Great. People can follow Tim Westhoff as Timothy Westhoff on Facebook and on Twitter as Westhoff Timothy. Tim, enjoy the rest of your Labor Day, and thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Adam. Greatly appreciated, and you do the same, sir.